candidate that surprises you. Sal, come on in. So Sal, we have 25 minutes to chat.
Yes.
The questions are being submitted in advance by the audience. You'll be asked some of the same ones that Bill de Blasio was asked, some different ones. But to start off, why don't you just introduce yourself and give us a little opening thought about who you are and why we should be excited about your candidacy.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. And and I want to thank all of the sponsors for hosting this great event. My name is Sal Albanese. I'm the only candidate in this race that's not a career politician. A little bit about my background. I came here as an immigrant at the age of 8. I grew up in a working class neighborhood in Brooklyn where my mother raised us on a garment worker's salary. The public schools, the sports programs, the libraries, all services that the city offered helped to elevate my family from the working class to the middle class. I spent 11 years as a New York City public school teacher. I spent 15 years as a member of the New York City Council with an unblemished record of independence, from the Gay Rights Bill to the living wage law to term limits. I always voted in the best interest of my constituents and the city. The last 15 years I've been in the private sector as a lawyer and a financial services professional. New York City faces some unique challenges going forward from cities around the world. We can't afford to rest on our laurels. Hurricane Sandy showed just that. We need to be proactive. We need to improve our mass transit system, our roads, our bridges. We need to shore up our power grid, protect our coastline, and besides our physical infrastructure, we need to invest in our human infrastructure. By that I mean investing in schools in a big way, creating jobs here in New York City that will maintain our creativity and brain power. But in order to do that, you need a government that works for its citizens. Right now, we have an out-of-touch political class that basically spends more time at cocktail parties than listening to people in their neighborhoods. They often get elected indebted to special interests, and when they get there, they can't make decisions on the merits. That's why I'm running. I don't just talk about independence. I've lived it for 15 years on the city council. If you work with me, I want to make sure that we have a city that's fairer, smarter, and safer, a city where every neighborhood feels safe, where every young person has the skills to go on to college, and we pay people a decent wage for a day's work. I believe that at the end of the day, we're going to shock the political class and build a better New York.
Great. Thank you, Sal. So first question. Oh, great. There's some water for you. First question will be the same first question that we asked the public advocate. What parts of the Bloomberg agenda would you retain? And if elected, what would you change first?
Well, the first thing I would retain is one of the things that the mayor brought to the table is independence. He didn't know anybody anything when he got to City Hall. And I believe that that's something that I will also bring to the table when I'm elected mayor. I also think he's done some good things when it comes to economic development. The Cornell project is a great thing because it's going to diversify the economy and help create jobs in the city. He's done some good things on the health front, but his third term has been, in my opinion, a poor third term, as most third terms are. I'm a term limits advocate. He should have left after 8. But the public schools, I think he's demonized teachers, which has destroyed morale on the ground. And I speak from experience. I have 2 daughters. Both of them are teachers, and they come home, they say, Dad, why is the mayor talking like that about us? Everyone in our school is demoralized, and that's throughout the city. You can't demoralize the people that are providing the services to our children in the city. They're not creating the problems that we have in our schools. They're much more complex. Also, I think the mayor has not done enough in terms of relating to people, especially in the outer boroughs. There's a lack. He doesn't emote well, which I think is. I've been to the Rockaways. I've been to Staten Island, where people are really hurting after Sandy, and I don't think the mayor feels their pain. He says he does. So that's something that I would bring to the table: being in touch with people in neighborhoods, making sure that we don't demonize our labor force, which provides great services for the city. And I would never serve 3 terms.
Hey. You know, one of the things you said in your opening statement was that this should be a city where workers get a fair wage, or residents get a fair wage. Are there specific policies that could have been enacted, or is that a reference to things that failed to happen in the last 4 years, or what is your plan to ensure fair wages for all New Yorkers?
Well, it's interesting because, you know, I've been out of government for 15 years. I've been in the private sector. I passed a living wage bill in the city, the first living wage in the city's history, the second in the country, which impacted 70,000 workers and put $3 billion in their pockets. That's not my statistic. That's the IBO, the Independent Budget Office. For 15 years, all of these people that are running for office are now talking about living wage bills. I mean, it's amazing that they want to expand economic opportunity for folks, but literally did nothing over that period of time. It's curious that they're discussing it. What I want to do is expand what I did with my living wage bill and make sure that we use our contracting power. The city lets billions of dollars in contracts every year, and they hire workers. I want to make sure that those workers get paid a living wage. My living wage bill in 1996 called for $12 wage, $12 per hour, including health benefits, and it worked. It really, and it didn't destroy the economy. Mayor Giuliani at the time criticized it as being frivolous. So I want to expand that living wage effort. Many cities across the country have done it, and I've actually got a record of doing it. I'm not coming here to tell you that I want to expand living wage legislation when people have been in office all of these years as council members, public advocates, and did nothing about it. I want to build on something that I did and continue that effort.
Great, thank you. This is a question from our audience. New York City's matching funds program is a good start, but not enough. Would you support a full public financing system through clean money, clean elections, similar to what other states have?
Absolutely. I'm one of the sponsors of this law, which I think is imperfect, because there's still a tremendous amount of money that if you look at the filings of some of the people that are running, you'll see that there's a huge amount of money from lobbyists and people who do business with the city. So it's not a perfect law, but it's a decent law because people like me would not be in the race if it wasn't for the matching system, because you know, you wouldn't compete. So I believe that the law that they have in Maine and Vermont is much more efficient, much better. I would lower the amount of money that you spend in these races from $6 million to maybe $3 to $4 million, and actually lower the caps for contributions, and it would be a better system. But I think one of the major problems that we have in America is we have a system that's a political system that's polluted by big money. It's a much better system here, but we have a long way to go.
Right. You know, speaking about the country brings us back to something that Bill de Blasio spoke about. He sees New York as a progressive beacon, and that the role of the mayor is that there is a national spokesperson role or duty in the role of mayor. Do you agree with that? And how would you use the role of mayor to be a national progressive voice?
Well, I agree with Bill on this point. When you're the mayor of New York, you have a bully pulpit. So one of the things the current mayor has done is he's taken that bully pulpit and made a major impact on gun control legislation. So we need to do that with economic development. We need to do that with once again, transportation, a lot of issues that are really creating problems for many Americans can be addressed by a mayor who's got the bully pulpit of New York. For example, the issue of economic inequality, raising the minimum wage and indexing it to inflation. You can get all of these mayors together and really make a difference. So that's a role that I definitely will play, and I've got a number of issues that I want to focus on, including income inequality.
Great. Now, from the national, let's get to the very local. This question has been submitted twice, so it's passionately felt. What will you do to stop the construction of the 91st Street transfer station, and where would you suggest this facility be built instead?
Well, that's a good question. I am actually going to visit that facility. I was invited by the Assemblyman Kellner there, and I want to see myself what it looks like. I've got a real problem with it post Sandy. because I don't know. God forbid we have a storm like that again, and it's probably going to happen, and that transfer station gets overwhelmed, and all of that sewage winds up in the streets of Manhattan. And by the way, it's the issue also in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, and in Queens as well. There are 3 transfer stations that are being built, and they're all obviously being built by the water. So post Sandy, I think it's very dangerous to build those transfer stations there. I'd have to be totally assured that it would withstand a Sandy-like storm.
Yeah. Now you've mentioned Sandy a couple times. You mentioned it as an example of the mayor's lack of the common touch. You've mentioned it now. Are there obviously rebuilding after Sandy, not just rebuilding that area, but thinking strategically about building and growth citywide for a world that's facing a changing environment? It's going to be a major task for the next mayor. What are some of the principles or some of the specific plans that you would want to lay out for rebuilding in a post-Sandy era?
Well, I say this on a regular basis during this campaign. We have a reactive government. I mean, we knew, scientists have been warning New York City and New York State that for 10 years that a storm like Sandy would cause a disaster like we experienced. And no hearings were held. Nobody did anything. Governor Spitzer, to his credit, ex-Governor Spitzer, was on television recently. He said that he's to blame as well, because they were being told repeatedly that this was going to happen. We didn't shore up our power grids. We didn't protect our coastline. We didn't protect our mass transit system. I want to obviously think forward, not 5 years, 10 years, but 20 years down the road and into the future by addressing this. And I mean, there are a lot of potential solutions. I mean, our infrastructure has to be totally rebuilt. I mean, there are a number of things that I want to do, and I'm going to bring in some of the experts that are out there. I mean, Jacobs at Columbia is one. There are a number of things, but it's one of the first things I will do as mayor is to put all these plans into effect and select the best way that we can protect the city going forward. I mean, the Netherlands has a tremendous effort. Has a lot of different ideas on how to address it. So we're going to pick and choose from places even around the world, and we're going to be prepared so a storm like this will not paralyze the city and cause the tremendous economic damage that we've seen over the last couple of months. I mean, I have to tell you that I'm also disappointed in the city's post-Sandy efforts, because people are frustrated across the city in those areas. They're dealing with insurance companies with mold issues. They're dealing with rules that they don't have any clarity on how to rebuild. What are the flood maps going to look like? I proposed a task force in each of the boroughs that would be on the ground in those neighborhoods, interagency task force that would be facilitating all of those issues for the thousands or tens of thousands of residents that are frustrated and have not been able to get answers. There are no miracles here, but they want clarity. They want to know what's next. When are the beaches going to be ready? How high do I have to build my house? Do I have to put it on stilts? They're in limbo right now. And once again, I think the city has not done an effective job in addressing those issues and coordinating that response. Okay.
But by the way, the cheers for the Netherlands, you might have thought was like a 17th century New Amsterdammer hearkening, is actually that Tracy's husband is from the Netherlands. Oh. So there's not a huge Dutch vote you need to reach out to. Well, don't be fooled by the level of applause. You mentioned transportation in your discussion of Sandy. You mentioned it before as a national issue. New Yorkers just this week experienced yet another fare hike. Wow. One might argue that one of the architects of that fare hike is going to be the candidate that you might run against if you were to become the Democratic nominee. Yeah. But the mayor is not in control of the MTA. Well, what could the mayor do to fix or improve our subway system?
You must have read my plan. I'm the only candidate that has promulgated a plan to address mass transit. It's totally being ignored by most of the candidates, actually all of the candidates. I have proposed that the New York City transit system be under the control of the city, that the city council and the mayor be accountable for the system. So this way we have transparency. We know that the suburbs are getting more money than the city. There are all kinds of fiscal issues there that need to be addressed, and funding issues that we don't have any control over. I think it's outrageous that the city of New York does not have any control over one of its most important services. So that's my first plan. My second plan, my second proposal within the transportation area, which I am the only one talking about, is fair tolling. We want to reduce tolls in areas where they have limited mass transit options and add tolls to bridges that have lots of mass transit options. And also, it would reduce congestion in the city of New York. There are trucks rumbling through city streets trying to get over to the free tolls. In Brooklyn, you've got huge backups of people trying to get on the Brooklyn Bridge, and the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, which is tolled, has an incredibly there are no lines there, and there's a lot of air pollution issues. And this would address it. And Nightberg has praised it. The Strap Hangers campaign has praised it. We want to widen and expand bike lanes. We want people out of their cars. So this is a comprehensive plan. As I said, I could spend a lot of time talking about it because it's on our website, salalbanese2013.com. As I said, it's been praised by the Transportation Alternatives has praised it. The Strap Hangers has praised it, and it would really make the city a better place in terms of transportation, and in terms of the tolls, it would generate $1 billion from the revenue, and 3/4 of that would go to the mass transit system, which would keep the fare at a reasonable rate. I think it's unconscionable that if the inflation rate is at 2%, 2.5%, and we just raised the fares on people to 8 or 9% over. I mean, it's way over the inflation rate, and it's a real disaster for a lot of working class families. I mean, I talk to people that are earning $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year, and they're paying huge amounts of money for transportation, and people that are earning $20,000, $30,000 a year on our mass transit system. I believe it's not being addressed as effectively as it should, because a lot of working class people use the mass transit system. It's not a priority. I mean, we had a mass transit forum last week, and it was incredible to hear some of my opponents who have actual input into the city budget that they would not increase mass transit aid to a tune of $570 million, which would be a slight percentage increase. They said they'd have to look at the budget. This is not a service that's frivolous. This is essential to the quality of life of the city of New York, and we can find in a $70 billion budget additional money for one of our most important services.
Yeah. Does congestion pricing factor into your plan? Do you think that was a good proposal or no?
Well, I wouldn't call it congestion pricing. I mean, it's a much more sophisticated plan than congestion pricing. That's not my term, by the way. That's the term of Gene Roshanoff from the Strap Hangers campaign. Congestion pricing. This is called fair tolling, which will have the same effect, only a much better effect, actually.
One more transportation question that came in from an audience, getting very to the minutia again. Would you insist that bicycles have tail lights?
Why not? I mean, I don't see a problem with that. I actually think it's important because there are more and more cycles in the city, and one of the things that I will do, by the way, is make sure that we have. I've called for the hiring of 3,800 more additional officers, and I want to assign them to quality of life conditions in the city, including speeding and enforcing traffic regulations. We still have lots of people that are speeding. We have a lot more people on bicycles now, so we need to make sure that we have tail lights and we enforce the city's traffic laws, or else you're going to see a lot more fatalities, a lot more people being struck by vehicles in the city. But that's not a bad idea.
Okay. Also in public health, someone asked the question about paid sick leave. I probably don't need to tell you what the current bill holds, but do you think that it It's a good bill. Would you go further?
Well, I mean, paid sick leave makes a lot of sense. You don't want people who are sick going to work. It's just counterproductive to them and to the people around them. I think we've got to be careful about the kind of bill that we pass because there are some mom and pop business that are teetering, and we don't want to drive them out of business and cause a major job loss, which will have the opposite effect. So I like the Connecticut legislation, and that's one of the models I'm looking at. But we certainly need a paid sick leave bill, and I would support it.
Can you describe the Connecticut legislation or something about it that?
The Connecticut legislation impacts businesses that have 50 or more employees. So they're larger businesses than the current bill calls for. I believe 5 employees. I think that will cause some serious economic damage to a lot of small mom and pop stores. But 50 would be something that I would think is feasible. It's worked in Connecticut, and maybe even lower. I mean, that's negotiable. But I certainly think 5 is problematic. But we need to pass the bill.
Right. Thank you. Also on healthcare, we have a question about single-payer healthcare for New York, as in Medicare for all. This sounds more like a state than a city issue, but to bring it to the mayor level, what would you do to ensure that more New Yorkers have affordable or single-payer health coverage?
Well, I've always supported single-payer legislation. I think we missed a boat on it, but the president did his best, and we got the Affordable Care Act. In New York, you would need state legislation. There is a bill in the Assembly by Dick Gottfried that's been there for a while for a single-payer bill. I would certainly support that. I think it makes a lot of sense.
I even think he's doing a press conference on it this week or next week.
It makes a lot of sense because it would bring the cost of medical care down in the city, and it would provide more equitable health care for all New Yorkers. The other thing I would do is I would work with the labor unions. Many of the labor unions have their own health and welfare funds, and as a supplemental health care initiative, I would try to merge them into one and use the leverage to deal with pharmaceutical companies like the Veterans Administration does, and Medicaid and Medicare. They have a lot of leverage, and they're able to bring the price of drugs down. So there are things we can do within city government, but you have to do that through negotiation, and you have to have a good relationship with the labor leaders. I relate pretty well to most of the labor leaders in the city, but that's one of the things I would bring to them and say, let's see if we can make this more cost effective. I mean, we know that retirees and others are paying thousands of dollars a month for cancer drugs. It's incredible how expensive it is. And if you have bargaining power, you can go to these pharmaceutical companies and say, look, we can give you this business. We've got to drop the prices. So that's one of the areas I would look at.
Right. One final question before a closing statement to keep us on schedule. But the final question is that while everyone in this room might be progressive and at times idealistic, they're also going to be practical.
Right. That's good.
Not a bad plan. Practically speaking, what is your avenue to victory in a Democratic primary, and why should groups invest their time in a candidacy that might have raised a little bit less money and is polling lower in some of the polls?
Well, I announced in January, and we have, as I said, a unique system here in the city that allows candidates to raise money from small donors. I'm raising my money from average New Yorkers across the city. I'm avoiding raising money from registered lobbyists and what have you. We will have the resources to be competitive. This election's about 7.5 months away. It's a really long way off. It's very fluid. I believe at the end of the day, when people examine my record versus the record of my competitors, that will prevail. And I hope that people in this room and people around the city take the time to explore my record and my positions. And I think what we want is the best mayor of New York. I mean, if you're looking, it's a pretty cynical process in a way, because if you're looking, if you raise money from special interest groups like many of my opponents have, I mean, you can raise a lot of money that way pretty easily. But when you get there, you're handcuffed. So the best, I say to people, the best approach is let's raise money from average New Yorkers who are interested in good government. And even though, as I said, we're polling very low now, I just announced, and I've been in the private sector for 15 years, those poll numbers are going to increase as we move forward. So I would ask people to monitor the campaign closely, and look at the issues carefully, as you all. There's a pretty sophisticated audience here, and also examine the records of the candidates. I think you want the best mayor for the city of New York, and I think I'm the most qualified.
Great.
And that would carry the day.
And now you have a 1-minute closing statement. Any other final thoughts you want to send us away with?
Well, I want to thank you for inviting me, and I want to thank all of the sponsors for this very informative forum. But let me be clear about one thing. I mean, there are a lot of ideas that you'll hear tonight, a lot of proposals, but none of those proposals will come to fruition if you elect somebody that's indebted to special interest. People take polls and regurgitate that back to folks, and what you have to look at is, how will you get to City Hall? Who are your supporters? Who are your donors? I'm raising money from average New Yorkers in every neighborhood in the city. I'm also the only candidate in this race who's not a career politician, and I tell you wholeheartedly, I'm the only candidate who will put the interest of New Yorkers first over special interest and political bosses. And I believe with supporters like yourselves that we can build a better New York going forward. And I thank you for inviting me tonight.
Let's give a liberal ovation to Sal Albanese. And once again, the website, if you want to learn more about him, is salalbanese2013.com.
Correct. Thanks.
Thank you, Sal. Thanks very much.